Some people collect coins, some collect memories. He collected the moments no one else noticed. The pause before someone says, "I'm fine," the silence after a door closes, the breath someone holds when they almost speak the truth. Our journey today examines the small moments we overlook, the tiny experiences that slip through our fingers while we wait for something bigger. What if the life we seek is made up of these very overlooked parts? May this story gently divert your attention as you drift towards rest. In a small building tucked between two larger structures, so easy to miss that most, people walked past it daily without ever seeing it, there existed a museum dedicated to micro moments, not grand historical events, not famous artifacts, not important cultural treasures. This museum collected and preserved the tiny, fleeting moments that most people experienced and immediately forgot. The first sip of morning coffee, the feeling of sun on your face when you step outside, the smile from a stranger, the perfect temperature of bath water, the sound of rain on windows, the smell of bread baking. Micro moments, the smallest units of human experience, the fragments that, taken together, actually comprised most of what we called living. The museum's founder and sole curator was a woman named Iris Park. She was 81 years old, small and vibrant, with eyes that noticed everything. She'd spent 60 years collecting these moments, not physically, because how do you physically preserve a moment? But through careful documentation, artistic representation, and what she called experiential installation. Iris had started the museum after a near-death experience when she was 21. She'd been in a severe car accident, had clinically died for 3 minutes, and during those 3 minutes had experienced what she could only describe as a review of her life. But the review hadn't shown her big moments, not graduation or her first kiss or major achievements. Instead, she'd experienced hundreds of tiny moments, the taste of her grandmother's soup, the feeling of grass under her bare feet as a child, the way afternoon light had looked filtering through curtains in her childhood bedroom, the sound of her father's laugh, the texture of her favorite sweater. Micro moments, and they'd been so beautiful, so precious, so full of life that Iris had wept at their perfection. When she'd been revived, when she'd recovered and returned to living, she'd made a decision. She would pay attention to these moments, would collect them, would help others see that life wasn't what happened during the big events. It was what happened in the tiny spaces between them. That was 60 years ago. The museum had grown slowly, organically, as Iris developed ways to capture and share these micro-experiences. Marcus Chun arrived at the museum by accident. He was 39 years old, a venture capitalist, and he was running late for a meeting 3 blocks away. He'd taken a wrong turn and found himself in front of the museum's small door. Normally, he would have simply course-corrected and hurried on, but something made him stop. Maybe it was the sign, Museum of Micro Moments, admission-free, time required, as much or as little as you have. Marcus couldn't remember the last time he'd been in a museum. Couldn't remember the last time he'd done anything that wasn't directly related to work, to deal-making, to the constant hustle that had defined his adult life. He was exhausted in a way that sleep didn't fix. He was successful but joyless. He was constantly busy but couldn't remember the last time he'd actually experienced anything. On impulse, he pushed open the door. Inside, the museum was smaller than he expected but strangely peaceful. Soft lighting. The smell of something pleasant he couldn't quite identify. The sound of what might have been distant wind chimes or might have been his imagination. Iris appeared from a back room. She looked at Marcus with knowing eyes, seeing past his expensive suit to the exhaustion beneath. "Welcome. Are you here for the quick tour or the full experience?" Marcus checked his watch. "I have maybe 10 minutes. I'm late for—" "Perfect," Iris interrupted gently. 10 minutes is enough for the introduction. This way." She led him to a small room containing what looked like a photography exhibition. But as Marcus looked closer, he realized the photographs weren't of grand vistas or important events. They were of tiny things: a coffee cup with steam rising, a dog's nose, pressed against a window, fingers interlaced, rain on pavement, a child's muddy shoes by a door. Under each photograph was a description, but not of what was shown, of what was felt. Under the coffee cup, the first sip of morning coffee. Temperature, exactly right. Taste, familiar and grounding. Duration, 3 seconds. Frequency, daily. Appreciation level. During actual experience, 0. Value upon reflection, immeasurable. Under the rain photo, rain starting while walking home. Sound, first drops hitting. Pavement, smell, petrichor, earth, water. Sensation, sudden cooling, then cold drops. On skin, duration, 15 seconds before running for shelter. Percentage of people who actually notice, 5%. Percentage who rush past, 95%. Marcus looked at photo after photo, reading the descriptions. Something in his chest began to ache. When was the last time he'd actually tasted his coffee? He drank it every morning while checking email on his phone. It was fuel, not experience. He couldn't tell you what it tasted like. When was the last time he'd felt rain? He avoided it, running from car to building, seeing it as an inconvenience rather than a sensation worth experiencing. When was the last time he'd noticed anything? Actually paid attention to the texture of living rather than just rushing through it toward the next goal? Iris watched Marcus's face as he looked at the photographs. She'd seen this reaction hundreds of times, a dawning realization that life was happening constantly, in tiny moments, and most people were completely missing it. "You're realizing something?" she said. It wasn't a question. Marcus nodded slowly. "I can't remember the last time I actually experienced anything. I'm so busy getting through my days that I'm not actually in my days. If that makes sense." "Perfect sense," Iris said. "Most people live this way, always focused on the next thing, always planning, achieving, moving forward. The present moment is just an obstacle between them and the future they're trying to reach." She pulled a small card from her pocket and handed it to Marcus. "This is a challenge, if you're interested." Marcus looked at the card. It listed 10 micro-moments. 1. Notice the temperature of water the next time you wash your hands. 2. Actually taste the next thing you eat. 3. Feel the texture of fabric against your skin. 4. Listen to one complete song without doing anything else. 5. Watch the sky for 1 full minute. 6. Notice the first 3 sounds you hear after waking. 7. Experience the sensation of breathing for 10 consecutive breaths. 8. Feel the weight of your body in a chair. 9. Notice the quality of light in a room. 10. Experience the moment of transition from waking to sleeping. For the next 24 hours, Iris said, see how many of these micro moments you can actually notice. Not think about, not plan, not photograph or document. Just experience fully for the brief time they last. Marcus looked at the list. It seemed absurdly simple. That's it? That's everything, Iris replied. If you can be fully present for even half of these moments, you'll have experienced more real living in 24 hours than most people do in a month. Marcus pocketed the card, skeptical but intrigued. And then what? Then you come back if you want, and I'll show you the deeper exhibitions. Marcus left the museum and hurried to his meeting, which had started without him. He apologized, jumped into the discussion of acquisition terms and market valuation, his mind already racing ahead to the next call, the next deal. But the card in his pocket nagged at him. That evening, remembering the challenge, he tried. He washed his hands after arriving home, and for the first time he couldn't remember how long he actually noticed the water. It was warm, almost hot. The sensation of water flowing over his hands, the temperature shift, the wetness, it was actually pleasant. 3 seconds of experience he'd been having and missing countless times every single day. Then dinner. Takeout, eaten while checking email as always, but he remembered, actually tasted. Marcus set down his phone, picked up a bite of food, put it in his mouth and actually paid attention. The taste was complicated, savory, slightly sweet, with a hint of something bitter. The texture was soft in some places, crispy in others. The temperature was warm, but not hot. It was actually a complex sensory experience that he'd been having every night, while completely distracted. But then his phone buzzed. An email from Tokyo. He grabbed it without thinking, and the next 5 bites happened automatically, unconsciously, the moment of actual tasting already lost. This happened over and over that evening. He'd remember the challenge, pay attention for a moment, then get pulled back into distraction. His mind would wander. His phone would demand attention. The habit of constant partial attention was so ingrained that full presence lasted only seconds before dissolving. At bedtime, he lay down and tried to notice the transition from waking to sleeping, but he was asleep before he even realized he'd stopped paying attention. The next morning, he woke to his alarm and immediately reached for his phone, checking emails before he was fully conscious. Then he remembered, noticed the first 3 sounds. Too late. He'd already missed them, whatever they'd been. This was harder than it seemed. Being present, actually experiencing the micro moments instead of thinking about them or rushing past them, it required a kind of attention Marcus had apparently forgotten how to access. After 24 hours, Marcus returned to the museum. He felt slightly embarrassed, like he'd failed an easy test. Iris greeted him with a knowing smile. "How did it go?" "Terrible," Marcus admitted. "I managed maybe 3 of the 10, and even those I could only hold attention for a few seconds before getting distracted." 3 is excellent for a first attempt, Iris said. "Most people manage 0. Come, let me show you why this is so difficult." She led him to a different room, this one containing a series of installations that looked like art pieces but were actually experiential demonstrations. The first was a glass case containing a smartphone. Around it were projected images, showing everything the phone delivered: news, emails, social media, messages, entertainment, information, hundreds of streams of content, all demanding attention, all pulling focus away from immediate experience. The modern attentional environment, Iris explained, is designed to fracture your presence. Every app, every notification, every stream of content is optimized to capture your attention and hold it. Your brain has been trained for years to be constantly distracted, constantly divided, constantly elsewhere. She gestured to another installation, a treadmill facing a screen showing rapidly changing images. You're not just walking through life, you're running on a treadmill of constant stimulation, always moving but never arriving anywhere real. The micro moments, the actual texture of living, they're happening all around you, but you're too distracted to notice them. "So what do I do?" Marcus asked. "You practice," Iris said, "like any skill. You practice bringing your attention to the present moment, again and again. And yes, you'll fail constantly at first. Your attention will wander after 3 seconds. You'll forget to notice. You'll get distracted. But each time you remember and return to the present moment, you're strengthening that capacity." She handed him a new card. This one had simpler instructions. Choose one moment today. Just one. It can be anything: drinking water, walking across a room, sitting down, standing up. But experience it fully. Give it complete attention for its entire duration, however brief. "1 moment," Marcus said. "That's it?" "One fully experienced moment," Iris corrected, "is more valuable than 1,000 moments passed through unconsciously." Start there. Marcus began practicing, not perfectly, not consistently, but persistently. Each day he'd choose one micro-moment and give it his full attention. Sometimes it was brushing his teeth. Sometimes it was the elevator ride at work. Sometimes it was his first breath after waking. The moments were unremarkable, ordinary, the kind of thing he'd been doing automatically for decades. But when he actually paid attention, when he gave them his full presence, they revealed a richness he'd been missing. Brushing his teeth, fully experienced. The mint taste of toothpaste, the bristles against his teeth and gums, the mechanical motion of his hand, the sound of bristles on enamel, the cool water when rinsing. 20 seconds of simple, complete sensory experience. Nothing profound, nothing life-changing, just real, actually happening, actually experienced rather than merely undergone. Slowly he got better at it. His attention span for presence increased from 3 seconds to 5 to 10 to 30. He could hold focus on a micro-moment for its entire, natural duration instead of getting distracted halfway through. And as he practiced, something unexpected happened. The rest of his life began to change. He started actually tasting his food, which made him more conscious of what he was eating. He started noticing how different foods made him feel, which changed what he chose to eat. He started actually experiencing his morning shower instead of using it as planning time for the day. The 10 minutes of full sensory presence became his favorite part of the morning. He started listening when people talked to him instead of thinking about his response while they were still speaking. His conversations got deeper. His relationships improved. He started noticing beauty he'd been walking past, architectural details, the quality of light at different times of day, small acts of kindness between strangers. None of these were dramatic changes, but together they accumulated. His life started to feel richer, fuller, more satisfying despite doing essentially the same things he'd always done. The difference was presence, actually being in his life instead of constantly being mentally elsewhere. 6 months into his practice, Iris invited Marcus to see the museum's deeper collection rooms she didn't show most visitors because they required context to appreciate. The first room was called The Collection of Almost Missed Moments. It contained detailed documentation of micro-moments that had almost slipped past, unnoticed but had been caught at the last second. A grandfather's last smile before he died, a child's expression of pure joy while playing, the exact quality of light through a window on a particular afternoon that would never be exactly replicated. The final time a pet nuzzled their owner before passing. Each moment had been fleeting. Each could have been missed. Each had been noticed and treasured, elevated from mere occurrence to conscious experience. These moments, Iris explained, would have happened whether or not anyone paid attention. The grandfather would have smiled regardless. The light would have fallen through the window, but by being noticed, by being experienced fully, they became something more. They became memory. They became meaning. They became part of the experiencer's life in a way that unnoticed moments never are. The next room was the collection of final firsts. It documented last instances that people hadn't realized were last instances until after. The final time a mother held her infant son, not knowing he'd refused to be carried after. That day, the last family dinner in a particular house before moving. The final shared laugh with a friend before they moved away. The last time doing something that had been routine but wouldn't be repeated. These moments were all micro-moments, Iris said. Ordinary experiences that seemed unremarkable while happening, but they gained significance retroactively. When it became clear they wouldn't happen again, if the experiencer had known they were final, they would have paid more attention. But we never know what's final until it's past. She turned to Marcus. This is why micro-moment collection matters, because most moments feel ordinary while we're in them. We think there will always be another one just like it. Another morning coffee, another conversation with this person, another walk in this park. But there won't be. Every moment is unique. Every micro moment happens exactly once and never again. And if we're not present for it, we miss it entirely. The museum changed Marcus fundamentally, not dramatically, not visibly from the outside, but internally in how he related to his own life. He began to see his existence not as a linear progression toward goals, but as an accumulation of micro moments. Each moment was complete in itself, valuable in itself, worthy of full presence. A business meeting wasn't just an obstacle between him and closing a deal. It was also the experience of sitting in a particular chair, in a particular room, with particular people exchanging ideas and energy in a way that would never happen exactly this way again. A difficult conversation with an employee wasn't just a task to get through. It was also a moment of human connection, however uncomfortable, that held its own value simply by being fully experienced. Walking from the parking garage to his office wasn't dead time to fill with phone calls. It was weather and movement and sensation and the city living around him. His life became richer, not because he changed what he did, but because he changed how he related to what he was already doing. And he realized something Iris had been trying to teach him all along. The life he'd been waiting to live someday when he achieved enough or earned enough or accomplished enough, that life was already here. It was made of micro moments, and he could either be present for them or keep waiting for something bigger that would never come. Marcus began bringing people to the museum, colleagues who were stressed and overwhelmed, friends who complained of joylessness despite successful lives, anyone who seemed to be rushing through existence without actually experiencing it. Most weren't ready for what the museum offered. They'd walk through, intellectually understand the concept, but remain unchanged. The pull of constant distraction, of living in the future rather than the present, was too strong. But some got it. Some had their own awakening to the micro moments they'd been missing. Some began their own practice of presence. And Marcus discovered that teaching others about micro moments deepened his own practice. Explaining to someone else why the taste of their coffee mattered, why the feeling of sun on their face was worth noticing, why full presence even for 3 seconds was valuable. It reinforced his own commitment to actually living his life. He started a small group that met weekly at the museum. They'd share micro moments they'd actually experienced that week, not thought about or photographed or documented, experienced fully, presently. Just 5 seconds of real attention given to the texture of existence. The sharing was simple. I actually tasted my lunch on Tuesday. I felt the rain on Wednesday morning. I noticed how my daughter's hand felt in mine when we crossed the street. Ordinary moments. But by being noticed, by being shared, they were elevated. They became the substance of life actually lived rather than merely undergone. Years passed. Marcus's practice deepened. He could now hold presence for minutes at a time, not just seconds. His life had become a collection of fully experienced micro moments rather than a blur of unconscious rushing. Iris aged. At 91, she was still running the museum, but starting to tire. She asked Marcus if he'd consider taking over when she was gone. The museum needs someone who understands viscerally, not just intellectually, she said. Someone who knows the difference between thinking about presence and actually being present. Someone who's lived the transformation, Marcus agreed. And when Iris passed peacefully 2 years later, he became the museum's new curator. He maintained everything she'd built while adding his own contributions. A room documenting micro moments from different cultures and eras, showing how presence was a universal human capacity that every age had to rediscover. A collection of children's experiences because children were naturally present in micro moments before being trained out of it. And he added one new exhibition, the collection of recovered moments. This room documented moments that people thought they'd missed, thought they'd been too distracted to notice, but which had actually registered somewhere in their consciousness and could be recovered through careful attention. The smell of your childhood home, still accessible in sense memory. The exact sound of a loved one's laugh, preserved somehow in the back of your mind. The quality of light in a room where something important happened, still vivid if you sit quietly and remember. These moments had been experienced, just not consciously. They lived in the body, in the senses, in the deep mind. And by bringing attention to them now, by actually noticing what had been noticed unconsciously, they could be recovered and appreciated. It was never too late to start collecting micro moments. Even the past held treasures that could be rediscovered through present attention. In the museum's lowest level, accessed by a narrow staircase that most visitors never discovered, Marcus created what he called the room of this moment. It was empty, completely. No installations, no documentation, no art, just a comfortable chair, a window, and silence. Above the chair was a simple sign. This moment will never happen again. It is already happening. It is all you have. Are you here for it? People who found this room would sit in the chair, look out the window, and practice. The most basic and most difficult thing, being fully present for whatever was happening right now. The play of light through glass, the sound of the city, the sensation of breathing, the thoughts moving through the mind, whatever was actually occurring in this exact moment. Not thinking about presence, not trying to have a profound experience, just being here, now, awake to whatever was. Most people could manage only a minute or two before getting restless, before the mind wandered to past or future, before presence dissolved back into distraction. But that minute, that 1 minute of full, complete, undivided presence was worth more than hours of unconscious existence. It was life actually being lived, experience actually being had. The micro-moment not just occurring but consciously received. And for people who could access even 1 minute of this quality of presence, everything else in the museum became clear. All the exhibitions and collections and documentation were just pointing toward this. the simple, difficult, revolutionary act of being fully in your own life while you're still alive to live it. On the 40th anniversary of his first visit to the museum, Marcus sat in the room of this moment at dawn. He'd been practicing micro-moment collection for 4 decades. He was 79 years old, slowing down physically, but more alive than he'd ever been. He sat in the chair and paid attention to the moment he was in. The early light coming through the window, the coolness of the air, the slight ache in his lower back, the sound of a bird somewhere outside, the rise and fall of his breath, the feeling of the chair supporting his body. Nothing special, nothing profound, just this moment fully experienced for its entire duration. And Marcus knew with the certainty of long practice that this was what Iris had been trying to teach him from the beginning. Life wasn't somewhere else. It wasn't in the past or the future. It wasn't in big achievements or grand experiences. It was here now in the accumulation of these tiny moments that most people rushed past without noticing. He'd spent the first 40 years of his life missing these moments, always focused on the next thing, always seeking satisfaction and achievement rather than presence. He'd spent the last 40 years recovering them, learning to notice what had always been there, training his attention to rest in the micro-moment instead of constantly leaping ahead. And now, in his 8th decade, life was full, rich, satisfying, not because anything external had changed, but because he'd learned to actually be present for the life he was living. The sun rose higher. The moment he'd been experiencing gave way to the next moment, and then the next, each one complete, each one worthy of full presence, each one happening exactly once and never again. Marcus stayed in the chair for an hour, collecting micro-moments, not thinking about them, not analyzing them, just being present for them as they occurred, just living. Finally, actually living. The Museum of Micro-Moments is still there, tucked between larger buildings, easy to miss unless you're looking for it. You could visit someday if you wanted. Marcus is still the curator, still welcoming visitors who are ready to learn what he learned. But you don't need the museum to start collecting micro-moments. You can begin right now. This moment, as you lie here reading these words, preparing for sleep, this is a micro-moment. It's happening exactly once. It will never be repeated. Are you present for it? Can you feel the surface beneath you? Notice the quality of darkness or light. Sense the air on your skin, hear the sounds around you. Or are you already thinking about tomorrow, already planning, already mentally somewhere else? The life you're waiting to live is made of moments like this. Thousands of them, millions of them, and most of them will slip past unnoticed unless you practice being here for them. Start small. Choose one micro-moment tomorrow. Just one. Actually taste your coffee. Actually feel the shower water. Actually notice the first sound you hear after waking. Don't think about it. Don't photograph it. Don't document it. Just experience it fully for the 3 or 5 or 10 seconds it lasts. That's all. That's everything. Because a life made of fully experienced micro-moments is a life actually lived, and a life rushed through unconsciously, always focused on the next thing, is a life missed. Despite being physically present for it, you have this moment right now, this exact configuration of sensation and experience that will never occur again. Will you be present for it, or will you let it slip past like 10,000 others while you wait for life to start? The choice is always now, always in this micro moment. Rest in this one. Be fully present for the sensation of your body settling towards sleep. Notice the gradual letting go, the softening, the drift toward unconsciousness. This moment of transition from waking to sleeping, it's happening right now. It will never happen exactly this way again. Are you here for it? Be here, just for this, just for now. Let that be enough. Let this moment be the one you actually experience. Fully, completely, finally. Rest now. Be present for the falling. Notice the dissolving. Experience the last few moments of consciousness before sleep arrives. These micro moments, they're all you have. They're everything. Be here, now, this. Rest.